Well, many of us rely on our gut to make decisions, especially the big ones in our lives, but our own intuition could be leading us astray, probably, in fact, is leading us astray, and regularly. Best-selling author Michael Lewis explores this idea, among many, in his new book, The Undoing Project, a friendship that changed our minds. It follows the intense collaboration between two Israeli psychologists who discover the ways in which the human mind, quite simply, can get it wrong. And here to discuss it all, the aforementioned Michael Lewis. Thanks for being here.
Pleasure.
Really appreciate it. Interestingly, when you look into this book, it does seem that maybe this is the book that should have been written before all of your other wonderful books, since in a way, the work of these two men is what so much is predicated upon. I mean, it's really, it's hard to quantify, but if you could, please try.
Well, it certainly speaks to Liar's Poker and The Big Short and Moneyball.
Yeah.
And the reason is they're doing something that is so fundamental. They're exploring human nature, the way the mind works when it's dealing with uncertainty. And they have insight after insight about essentially cognitive illusions. It's sort of like the mental equivalent of optical illusions, and how our mind is capable of tricking us in certain circumstances. We have this tool for getting through life and making judgments and making decisions. It's not a statistician. It's not comfortable with probabilistic calculations. What it wants is a story, basically, and it seeks patterns, and often that's good. But it does have these glitches that lead it to see kind of false stories and false patterns.
And so the narrative really, I mean, it's a powerful tool. And is it that we assume it's a tool for good, and it isn't always?
I think we exaggerate its infallibility. The central kind of lesson of their work is we are wired for fallibility. It's not shameful. It's the mind. The mind it makes mistakes, like the ears make mistakes and the eyes make mistakes, and that for whatever reason we want the world to be seem like a more certain place than it actually is. So Moneyball. I mean, Moneyball. The reason I get to this story is after I write Moneyball, I find out about these guys, and they explain to me the central quandary in the story of Moneyball, which is you've got this team, the Oakland A's, who are able to build really good teams from players that other people don't want, basically. They're finding misvalued baseball players, overvalued and undervalued baseball players. And the question is, how can a market for baseball players be that inefficient? Mm-hmm. Like, why is it that baseball experts don't know exactly what a good baseball player is? They kind of know, but they make mistakes. Why are they making mistakes? And these guys explained it. I mean, it rises even experts. You know, experts are as prone to these problems as everybody else. They think in stereotypes. They match. If they've seen a player, they look at a player. They're actually judging. Does he look like a good baseball player? If they see a player who doesn't look like anything they've ever seen before, they're suspicious on the face of it. If they see someone who looks exactly like other good baseball players, they're more likely to judge him a good baseball player, even if he isn't. You know, in the beginning of this book, I opened in the Houston Rockets draft room, where they're trying to figure out which kids to draft.
And a team at the forefront of quantitative analysis
Absolutely.
in the NBA.
And they have done their best to expunge human judgment from their decision making, right? They're trying to if they could do it all by algorithm, they would, but they realize they can't. I mean, and there's this temptation, you know, because you're dealing with inherently uncertain things. Your algorithm is not going to be perfect. It's only going to be a little better than humans, probably. So you're always tempted to let the judgment back in the room. But what's interesting watching them vet players is that players actually and their agents actually know how to prey upon these problems in the human mind. So they're guys who come into the draft room who actually look like Steph Curry. And their pitches, my game's kind of like Steph Curry. They physically resemble Steph Curry. They're 6'1", kind of light-skinned. They can shoot three-point shots. The characters who never would have been considered, you know, draftable by the NBA are all of a sudden plausible stories because there's this one that looks like him that's now in the NBA. And the general manager of the Houston Rockets, Daryl Morey, said to me, you know, I spend my life trying to guard against all the stuff that's trying to trick my mind and trick my scouts' minds. And it is endless. And these guys describe all the tricks.
And so you write a Moneyball, and I know that you asked yourself that question. You know, why is it that this happens? And you came up. What was it like to come upon these two gentlemen's work, and what was it about their relationship?
So if it had just been the work, I'd have just been interested, and I wouldn't have written a book about it. All my books really are driven by characters, and these two characters were breathtakingly interesting people, and very, very radically different from each other. So different that people who knew them couldn't imagine them even getting along, much less falling in love with each other, which is what they did. I think, like, yes, why is it that these guys are the first to start to explore this field? They created a field, judgment and decision making. They created an idea that you could explore the human mind in a kind of scientific way.
And apply it to
medicine and law and yes, and government. And they've touched, you know, the mind is involved in everything, so they've touched every aspect of human existence, and whether people are aware of it or not. But the relationship was so curious to me because they somehow became different people in each other's presence. That Amos Tversky was, everybody who ever met him said he's the smartest person they ever met. There's a psychologist who designed an intelligence test, and the test was, the longer it takes you to figure out that Amos Tversky is smarter than you, the stupider you are. And everybody who knew him said, well, that's just true. And he wasn't pretending, he wasn't like a nerdy kid. He wasn't pretending, he was fun. He was a war hero. I mean, this is a guy, he was a war hero. He was a Spartan warrior raised in Israel.
And in Israel,
this guy, a tough guy. But he had an intellect that was just, you know, everybody recognized it as just breathtaking. And Danny Kahneman has an intellect that not everybody recognizes as breathtaking, but Amos recognizes as a miracle. And that what Danny's gift is for, it's for insight. It's for seeing the mistakes people make. And Amos's gift is for generalizing them, seeing that, oh my God, it's not just you, Danny, who make those mistakes. It's not this, that you've actually identified something that's very kind of general to our species. And they teased out, this was the project, over a period of 10 years.
And they needed each other, it seems.
Oh my, yes. They needed each other so much that they tortured each other. They allowed each other to torture each other. When Amos was dying, on his deathbed, he said to Danny, after they'd broken up, no one in this life has caused me more pain than you. And Danny said it was all he could do. He had to bite his tongue because he was going to say the same thing back. That they caused each other intense pain and intense pleasure. But they generated this miraculous work that actually tells us something about ourselves.
And I want to get you out of here on this one. I know this was a book that you were almost scared to write. It gave you pause. You felt like...
It took me, I met Danny Kahneman 8 years ago because of Moneyball. And it took me a couple of years to realize what a story this was. And it took me 4 more years before I summoned the nerve to say I should be the one to write the story. And it was because I was dealing with a field I didn't know, psychology, and the backdrop was Israel and wars I didn't know that much about. There was a lot to learn, but the big thing was I had a sense, and I still have that sense, that I was writing about people whose minds were bigger than mine, and I was never going to get my mind around them in the way I could get my mind around a lot of my subjects. So I knew that it was going to be, there was going to be inherently flawed for that reason.
Gnat hunting elephants. I'm very, very happy that you did. It is a fascinating look. And every great Michael Lewis tome involves an aha moment. There are many to be had here.
Well, thank you.
Really,
Thanks for taking an interest.
Very much.